Right behind me is the sculpture of the Archer by Oscar Hansen. He was in the period, the early 1930s and through the 30s, an important sculptor. This is in memory of Hearst Coates Reed. The building was given by his wife, or widow, because he died early in 1929, and his sister-in-law, Mrs. Charles Schwepping. They were both daughters of John Shedd Reed. And so what you see here is this very stylized, in the manner of the period, view of an archer flanked with classic pillars or pilasters. And he's holding an bow, an archer's bow, that is parallel to the other horizontals that are in this system. Okay, so now we'll look at that in the context of this whole building's room here. This is the central room in a cruciform plan. We came in through one of the things, the entrance hall area. Then on two sides there are reference rooms and a periodical room on the right. And then there's another room to the north that we'll see in a few minutes. But the cruciform plan, and there were smokestacks originally behind here. The cruciform plan was like similar buildings that had been given by the family, the Shedd family in New Hampshire for another library, and then the Shedd Aquarium was opened in the late 20s. So this is echoing that form. This is more of a Roman room because it has a dome above it. It's the only public building in Lake Forest that has a dome, and it's great. And then the simple classical detail of the chandelier heightens the element also for us. Now, two things I will mention about, we're going to see these artworks here around us, and they are pictures of the artists and people at Renaissance, murals, 8 different full-height murals of classical or ancient authors. What we'll notice is that this is really related to 2 different kinds of ideas about the library. If you look at below each of the murals, there are now bookshelves. There used to be also some card catalogs, but there are bookshelves, and the bookshelves hold a range of literature from the reference room side. There's non-fiction and more fiction on the periodical side. This was a contrast, it goes back to the 19th century, with a public library. Is it supposed to be for the people's entertainment or for the people's edification? So we see the two together. And the artworks, I'll explain, represent the highlights of classical tradition in literature. So I'm going to start over here. To the left of the circulation desk. And by the way, I mentioned the circulation desk is integral to the architecture. You see, it's real timber. It's bigger 600. So this first panel shows both the line poet Homer, who goes back to the 7th or 8th century BC, and it shows Pindar the poet. Pindar was the best lyric poet of the early Greek tradition. And this is done in tempera, which is a kind of paint with egg, uses egg in its composition. Now this one, there's one woman in these murals, and this is Sappho the poet, and she's on the left, and we have Theocrates, the rural poet, wrote up hundred scenes with her, and of course here is the goats and other animals of the type. This panel is for the Greek drama, and it's one of the most important, and it has the most people in it of note. So we have Aeschylus Aristophanes, who wrote Agamemnon, which of course has lots of women in it. Aristophanes, who wrote a comedy about Lysistrata, which was a comedy about women getting control over the men in time of war. Sophocles, another tragedy author, Antigone and Oedipus Rex and Euripides, wrote Electra and the Trojan Women. So this is the birth of all drama. After those tragedy writers, it was Shakespeare who then stood out after that. Although the French were big, Racine and Corneille, his important ones about tragedy. They get their inspiration from these four writers. So now the next man here, this one is one of my favorite. This is my favorite person, Virgil, the poet Virgil. He's Roman now. We've been with the Greeks, but now we're talking about a Roman writer. He wrote the Aeneid, which is about sort of a prequel to the history of Rome. It's about the founding of Rome. Somebody who leads the Trojan War. But one of the most famous incidents involves a woman. Also, that's Queen Dido of Carthage. And Aeneas stops for a while and is in her guest with his entourage. Is her guest. But he decides to continue with his journey and leaves her, and she's distraught and burns herself on a fire on the beach as he leaves. So, again, a tragic story, but it's only one of many in an episodic work of poetry. And Virgil also wrote many kinds of poems about rural life, also, country life, which it was what Lake Forest was in 1931 in that period. This is the Roman orator Cicero. Now, Cicero is sort of known to people's day, but in the early 20th century, when people studied, they read both Virgil in high school and also Cicero in high school in the original Latin. So I got Virgil, but I was out of it by the time I got to Cicero. His orations were famous models of effective public speaking. This military-looking fellow is Xenophon. Xenophon wrote about war, and he was a certainly notable guy, and had great horses. These figures are philosophers, Diogenes, Aristotle, and Socrates. And Socrates with his scribe, the person who chronicled what he did, Plato. And so these are some of the mainstays of the Greek philosophical tradition. Plato's Republic, for instance, is a good example. And these were considered to be great books. And number 8, this has two major figures. One that people will remember from high school or junior high school geometry, which is Pythagoras. He's standing, and then kneeling in front of him is Thales with a tablet, and in Greek says, "Know thyself." So these 8 panels. Now, what was their significance? These were people who were supposed to read. This is 1930. In 1931, these were completed. In the year 1930, Edith Hamilton had published a book called The Greek Way. And she talked about these people as the important foundations of Western civilization, and talk about their simple language. The Greeks had a lot more words for each different variation on a thing than we have, where we use a lot of modifiers and describers for words for nouns. So these pictures are very simple to represent the simple style of Greek writing and Roman writing to some extent. So this was part of a movement at the University of Chicago. They hired a young man, Robert Hutchins, to be the new president. He was 29 years old in 1929. So he then started a whole Great Books program. By the 1940s, in the summertime, the classes were even going out to Aspen, and there were programs there. And by 1952, they published a set at the University of Chicago, and with the Great Books series, about 52 volumes. And there still is a Great Books reading group in this library that people can join to go through and read great books. But we're looking at the authors of several of the books. Certainly Aristotle, Plato, Virgil. These are the stalwarts of that tradition. Homer, the stalwarts of that great tradition. It's found University of Chicago in the 1940s and late 30s was teaching basically this as the curriculum.